Sheila Lamb, and I'm with the Virginia SBDC Network. For those of you that are not familiar with our organization, the Virginia Small Business Development Center is a partnership program between the U.S. Small Business Administration, George Mason University, and local host institutions throughout Virginia. With 26 locations across the Commonwealth, we provide training and technical assistance to small businesses in their local communities. Our one-on-one advising services are available at no charge. Today's webinar, Marketing Fundamentals for Craft Beverage Producers, is presented by the Virginia SBDC Network. We are recording today's presentation, and it will be posted on our website, virginiasbdc.org. Due to the large number of participants, everyone's microphone is muted and the chat feature is turned off. But if you have questions during the presentation, you can type those into the Q&A box. We have also enabled the live transcript function, which you can show or hide via your own meeting controls. And now it is my pleasure to introduce the Virginia SBDC Craft Beverage Assistance Program Manager, Chris Van Orden.
Thank you, Sheila. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's conversation about the marketing fundamentals that all craft beverage producers should have in place. As Sheila said, my name is Chris Van Orden, and I serve as the Assistant Director, or as the Manager of the Craft Beverage Assistance Program, at the Virginia SBDC at George Mason University. So today's program is going to be a free-flowing discussion on core marketing competencies. You can enter any questions that you might have in the Q&A function, and we'll do our best to answer them all either during or after the webinar. So I'm very excited to welcome today's speakers. John Park and Zack Jackson are co-founders of the JPG Agency, a Roanoke-based firm that provides accessible digital marketing services for brands, small businesses, and individuals. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Before we kind of dig into the meat of things here, I was hoping you can each share a bit about your background and a brief overview of what the JPG Agency is about.
Sure. So our background is interesting because it's kind of non-traditional for the marketing and branding space. I was a morning radio DJ for 20 years in Roanoke, Virginia. But, you know, in that setting, really had to hone my craft as far as audience engagement and being interesting and understanding target demographics and really operating what was a small business, which was the show. And was very fortunate in my time in Roanoke to work with a lot of small businesses in town for their promotional needs, or, you know, they were doing stuff at the radio station, or just me being out and about in town. And I really, you know, grew to really respect everything that they were doing and wanted to figure out ways that I could help them more, because I knew selfishly that it was like, well, what's good for them is good for the city, which is good for me, which is good for everybody. And so I accosted my friend John here at a farmer's market, and the rest is he can fill that in if he wants to.
Yeah, John, please.
Yeah, so kind of like Zach, you know, this is also kind of a second, you can call it a second career for me. I spent the first 2 decades of my post-college life as a financial planner. And for me, it wasn't that I didn't enjoy financial planning. I think this digital marketing thing and creating content has just been a lot more fun. And it is kind of an interesting way that Zach and I got together. You know, he and I were not, I wouldn't say we were friends prior to this business relationship. We, you know, knew of each other. You know, obviously Zach had a big presence in Roanoke due to being on air. And I just kind of was around the food and beverage industry. So I think a lot of people just knew who I was. And so a mutual friend of ours said, hey, we should all get together and do this thing. And that's kind of how it started. And Zach approached me at the Grandin Farmers Market one day, and I was just kind of hanging out, having some donuts. And I just looked at him and listened to him, and I said, hey, why don't you have a donut? And he's like, all right. And as soon as he grabbed one, I was like, all right, I think we can do this. I think in hindsight, I think if he declined the donut, I think I might have just been like, nah, I don't think this is this is gonna work out.
It's the
So
true
It
test.
was the test. I passed.
yeah, yeah, here we go. Here we are, almost 7 years later.
That's great. Well, yeah, I'm excited to kind of dig into what, your work is and the sort of kind of nuts and bolts of this sort of marketing space, right, for food and beverage, which is an area that you specialize in. So, kind of setting the stage here, we're talking about marketing today, right? When we use that term, when we talk about marketing, what do we mean and what don't we mean? I know there's a lot of kind of confusion about where the boundaries of marketing is, where they lie.
Yeah, I mean, they kick around. There's marketing and there's branding and there's advertising, and I'll also add that, like, again, as we came into this business, I felt like we understood the practices of marketing and branding and all those things. But then you start getting into that space, and you hear all of these different acronyms and terms and things, and you think, oh my God, I don't know anything. What is all this stuff? But the more I learned, the more I realized that it was all the same things I already knew, and no one was saying anything that was different. It was just they were using fancy letters. But
Mhm.
I kind of always break it down, like when you're talking about marketing and branding and advertising, it's branding is the one, and they all come together. I mean, one
Mhm.
can't exist without the other one. Branding is like that's the core of who you are. That is the voice of your brand. That is the story you want to tell. That is, that's the heart. That's your heart and soul. and
Mhm.
and marketing is really the strategy of how you're going to tell that story, and how you want it to be seen and heard by the world. And then advertising is kind of like, all right, well, this is the way I'm going to try to get more eyes or ears or whatever it through whatever paid thing or non-paid or whatever. That would be sort of that arm of marketing. At least that's how I look at the three-headed monster when they all come together.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything, John, you want to add to that? I know it's a big
Um,
question.
I mean, it's pretty concise and to the point.
Yeah. Well,
I wrote that down ahead of time.
I like it. Well, I mean, so, right, that's like the sort of concepts here. Of course, right, we're talking about tangible things, right? This is beyond the realm of just sort of a kind of idea in your head. You're talking about things to
Sure.
be implemented. So when you're working with a small business, let's say that, hey, somebody says, hey, I want to work with JPG, think about my marketing. How do you help them to kind of think about building and maintaining their marketing assets? Like, what are kind of assets here? What are some sort of foundational infrastructure that people
Mhm.
need to have in place as they kind of start in on the journey of being more intentional about marketing?
I mean, if it comes down to digital assets, there should be one location that everyone has access to, or people who would need those assets, right? So if we're talking about, photo assets or video assets,
Mhm.
it's probably a good idea to kind of keep them all in one place, not on somebody's phone.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and in reality, it's something that if we're just physically talking about maintaining digital assets, marketing assets, even us as a small business, we struggle with that too ourselves, and it's not an easy thing. But having a central location where things can be found, I think, is always helpful. So for us, we like to use Google Drive. I'm sure everybody's used it. I'm sure there's other things like Dropbox or Box or whatever it may be. Just have something where it's like, okay, cool. We're gonna stick our logos, our colors, or
Mhm.
whatever. And it can even be beyond marketing assets, right? It can be, standard operating procedure. It can be all these things just in a location that is not somebody's phone,
Yeah.
not the owner's phone. Because if it's on the owner's phone, then they have to all come to you to
Mhm.
get that asset.
Mhm.
So yeah,
And
I
having
would
it at
prioritize too, especially if you're starting out, but it's never too late to do this, is prioritize the quality of your assets. whether that be a logo or colors or designs and things. It's so important to have high quality versions of everything and not just one tiny little thumbnail logo and you try to blow it up somewhere else and it just doesn't translate anymore. And you want transparent versions of everything. And here's one that fits into a square, but this one fits into a circle. The more you can kind of have all of that flexibility and quality in your assets. And I know, especially in the beginning, it's hard where you're looking to save money or you're trying to stick within a budget and things, but those are the things that will burn you in the long run every single time. And it's better to just quality to start always.
Yeah. I think that kind of is like on a tangent from that is I think a lot of people, you don't know what you don't know. So if you're thinking about hiring a graphic designer or if hired a graphic designer and somebody's created a logo or created some assets for you, one of the things is like, hey, can I get these in vector format or whatever, or EPS or whatever it may be? Because you need to figure out, if you're taking the logo to say, get shirts made or whatever, they're going to say, hey, I need it in this format. Well, the question you should be asking is like, is this the only format that I need, or should I be getting more? And some producers are going to charge you more. And as to Zach's point, just go ahead and pay for it, because you never know when you might need it. Because the problem you may run into is you have a logo made or something made, and 5 years down the road, you can't get in touch with that graphic designer, or they've lost that file, so they can't produce something for you. Now you have to go get it redone. So just cover all your bases out the gate and just get it all.
I would add real quick too, especially, when it comes to assets, ask questions and always of who owns what as far as these assets go. When it's photography, videography, logos, we talked to somebody yesterday who they have a website through a certain individual, and the agreement in the beginning was that they don't own any of the pictures. It's the pictures of their own business. But if they stop using that web company, they have nothing in those assets anymore. And so now they're a prisoner to this company, paying them a monthly fee just because they will have nothing otherwise. Make sure you own what you want to own. And if you don't care about owning a certain thing, that's fine. But if you want to own certain things, you better ask that question.
Yep.
I think there's a lot of great points I want to latch on to here before we move on here, but I think for sure, making sure that you own the assets, that you have the right kinds of assets. You don't need to know all of the details especially if you're bringing in somebody else to, do these things for you. Not everyone's an advanced graphic designer, but knowing the right questions to ask, Hey, I own this, do I have, a vector version? If you're in this field, you have certainly seen when somebody, there's a festival that you attend, somebody does not have a vector version of their file. Everyone's is nice and crisp. It's blown up to, 2 feet tall. And then there's somebody that's super grainy. It doesn't reflect well on your brand. Going back to that person to try and redo it is going to be more costly. So doing it right the first time, you don't have to have a million assets or a million versions and all that thing, but just a couple of common formats that are going to be asked for. Ask the questions for sure. And I really like the point about both making sure that your company owns things, but having things in a place that's accessible, that you're having the right permissions to access these things. You really want to make sure that the people that are on your team, maybe your sales team, needs to be able to share your logo with the distributors they work with, because if they get asked for something, they don't have to report back and say, hey, we're going to get featured at this wine festival or this tap takeover. They want to put our logo in their newsletter. Well, making that easy for them, but there's other things that maybe you want to gatekeep, or it's only the executive suite, So just thinking methodically about the back end, about, well, what are the things that you have, who has access to them, and make sure that they're up to snuff and that you are the one in charge of them. So that's I feel like we could spend the whole time talking just about that, but I want to kind of get into some of the specifics about baseline. Here's what every company needs to have, and then sort of moving your way up as you get more sophisticated, or as you go from in-house sales to distribution, those kinds of things. So I think right away, it's hopefully you'll both agree that it's we can dispel the idea that small and micro producers can't afford marketing. Marketing is something that you're doing whether or not you have a specific line item budget on it. If you're taking photos and then putting them on social media, that's marketing, right? Even if it doesn't cost you anything,
Mhm.
right? It happens with $0 budgets, but it doesn't mean that it's unimportant. So what are some of the kind of most critical no cost marketing strategies, tools that producers should have or should be kind of running from day one?
Learn how to take some good photos.
Yes. Right. It's we all have our nice phones and
Yeah,
it's it doesn't have to be professional grade, but
yeah. Well, so along those lines, modern day mobile devices take very good photos. But you also have to feed it very good stuff, meaning, if you've got good light, you've got a good background, it's going to take a pretty darn good photo. I think people just don't realize that. But, if you're not a photographer, why would you, right? So, something is, and this maybe not as uh, pertinent to this industry, but I see so many times where, a restaurant or a chef will just take a photo of their dish from inside the kitchen, and it's like the lights in the kitchen are terrible, right? Had they just spent like a minute, walked outside to their dining room, hopefully there's some windows there, and just taken a photo in the natural light of the window,
Mhm.
it would have literally just made that photo just 10 times better. So just as simple things like that of like, oh yeah, I guess maybe even, if you're a distiller and you're thinking about taking a photo in the back warehouse, and all you have is fluorescent lights. No, go outside, or go out to the tasting room and find a window and stick, put your bottle or whatever you're taking a photograph of in the window. That right there is just that's free. You don't have to necessarily hire somebody.
Yeah, it's
Um,
in a food and beverage industry in particular, right? Making the only thing it has to do is make it look appetizing, and
absolutely.
it's
Absolutely.
it can really
Yeah.
hurt.
Yeah, and just maybe, take a little bit of time. And there's tons of YouTube videos out there, tutorials on how to actually take a decent photo just using your smartphone. You don't have to necessarily use a professional camera.
Yeah,
Um, and some days I get, I don't have my camera with me, so I'll just break out my iPhone and, set it up the best I can to get the best final product.
yeah, absolutely. Zach, what do you think? What are some other things that people can kind of put in place from day one?
I think from day one, you can really, you can understand how you want your story to be told, but then really understand like who is the audience that you're trying to reach. And I know we all sit here and we say, well, it's everybody. Like, no, it's not every. It's there's a certain type of target that is going to speak to your product is going to speak to better, and it's really understanding what that is and kind of looking at it from the other side and thinking about, well, when I see things about certain products, whether it be on social media or somewhere else, like what speaks to me? Why did this interest me? That sort of
Mhm.
thing. And I mean, there is no shame in the game of emulating. We'll call it emulating,
Mhm.
stealing ideas, whatever you want to call it, for what other people are doing in a space that you think are doing a good job at it, or that are you respect and see how they're successful. I mean, in the radio business, the common joke all the time was, if you stole an idea from me, it was at least the second time it's been stolen.
Mhm.
And it's just, find good practices and then try to understand who your audience is and what is going to move them. And
Mhm.
and I think sometimes we get in the weeds of like our own products and stuff. And we say, well, I'm going to put this product out because this product is great. Okay, but why is it great? Like, is
Yeah.
there beverages is a great one too, because especially if you're in like the alcohol space, it's kind of like I don't I want to know everything. I'm just speaking for myself here, and this is something that would speak to me is, there's 700 bourbons on a shelf, which I want to try it and I want to know about it, but
Mhm.
do I want to spend $50, here to figure that out? And if there was something somewhere telling me that story, giving me an idea of these are the tasting notes of this, and this is why it's different than this, and this is what it goes with, and giving me that story. Well, now I want to know. Like I'm
Mhm.
in. I want it. I'm going to try it. And so I think it's thinking on the kind of backwards. Really, is not like me trying to get people to see my product or buy my product, but really get them to to understand what actually motivates them to want to in the first place.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
this is when you mentioned this sort of stealing things, right? It's, hey, understanding why it works. It's probably not the strategy that's going to work perfectly for you in the beer world. One of the best brands that, in terms of at least their social media presence, is Allagash, right? Great brewery up in Maine. All of their photos are about their beer, like in the woods and on lakes and stuff. If you're not up in Maine, it probably is not a good story, but understanding why that fits in with who they are. And I think
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned the sort of kind of whether it's kind of, you call it brand identity or your unique value proposition. What is it
Yeah.
about you? I mean, in the end, you pour a glass of red wine. Does it look that much different than every other glass of red wine in the world? It's, some
No.
shade of red. Well, what next? And I think that, right, you still need those high res product shots. You need to have good labels and things like that.
Mhm.
But sort of figuring out how to connect everything that you do with the sort of the brand and like the sort of why us over the
Mhm.
500 other options that are available
Yeah.
here. So this ties
Yeah.
back to the work done on the front end of the brand identity.
I always
Yeah. I mean,
encourage people to think like when it comes to brands. Sorry, John, I cut you off there, but it is really think about your brand as a living, breathing creation. It's not just a glass of wine. It's not a
mhm.
restaurant or whatever. Like if your brand had a voice, like an actual voice, what is that voice? Is it sophisticated? Is it sarcastic? Is it empathetic? Does it love its community and cares about you know baseball? Like whatever it is, and
Mhm.
funnel that through. That's the voice, and that's what makes one glass of red wine sound different than another glass of red wine, because one has a voice and one's just a picture.
Yep.
But yeah, sorry, John, go ahead.
It's okay. I was gonna say, a very good current case study would be Miller High Life.
Mm.
They have totally embraced the fact that they are a dive bar beer, and embraced it 100%. So you just go look at what are they doing. They
Mhm.
just came out with a perfume that is supposed to be the essence of a dive bar. I mean, who goes to that level? I'm not saying that, as a small distiller, you have to go to that level, but that's the kind of level of thinking that they're doing,
Mhm.
right? So yeah, just even a case, look at their social media. They know who they are. They're embracing who they are. They're not trying to go after the necessarily the craft market scene. They know who they are, and they're
Yeah.
going after those people.
I think that's, yeah, being laser focused on your market position, who your customers are, right?
Hmm.
Everything else will flow from there, right? The brand copy, right? Your tasting notes for your product. If you're going after a mass market audience, writing really fussy tasting notes isn't going to get you there. Or maybe they want something esoteric from you. They want you to be playful. Your brand is kind of jokey. Okay,
Hmm.
your copy should reflect that. Your All of your photos, your social media, you're a brand that's kind of informal, casual, you make jokes. Okay, that's who you
Yeah.
are, but it can be very jarring when people are doing different things. And again, these are all things before you get into that sort of 201 level or bringing in outside help, really doing the work on the front end to say, who am I? And as you get more and more assets lined up,
Hmm.
it's going to keep telling the same story in kind of new and ideally interesting ways.
Yep. And like, I don't think people have to think too hard. I honestly, at the end of the day, I think most of these brand voices and characters that the brand is going to take on is essentially the person who started the company. It's you, right? It's because you're the one that's putting it out there. So, if you are that kind of person, then don't think too hard about it. Just be
Mhm.
yourself.
Yeah, inauthenticity, right? People can sniff that out a mile away if you're trying to be someone you're not. Of course,
Right.
companies are going to mature, you get more people on board, it has to grow like and evolve over time, but
Sure.
it has to come from somewhere real. So I think there's
Yep.
companies, people have a very good nose for fake kind of brands and freight marketing and all the stuff that doesn't
Mhm.
feel like there's a real company there. You're a small business. That is one of the few advantages small businesses have, is that it's real, like it's people behind it. It's not a corporate overlord somewhere, on the other side of the world. Theoretically, this is
Right.
you're there in your communities and people want to hear that. So speaking of maturing, right? Ideally, companies, whether the folks that are listening in now or over time, your company, your business is going to grow and mature. So your marketing strategy is going to kind of get more and more sophisticated as you go along. So maybe in the beginning, all you can really do is you deputize somebody to go around and take photos. You do your first logo design, one color, you write your product copy and, your tasting notes and okay, we're set for now. The next step, right? Hey, we're putting more stuff out there. We're going into further markets, right? Like how can kind of companies that are at that stage of expansion or whatever, growth or maturation, think about developing and deploying assets in a more kind of methodical and ideally measurable way?
I think
Can
go
I just
ahead.
say deploying assets? Can I just say deploying capital?
Yes, there's resources. Yes, that is definitely part of it. Yeah.
If you're maturing to that point, hopefully you don't have the time to necessarily be, able to concentrate on this aspect of it as much, right? Which means then you have to leverage your capital for other people's time.
Mhm.
I mean, that's essentially how we explain what we do to people. Yeah, you could do this on your own time. You sure could. But then that takes away from what you're trying to do, which is generate revenue for the business, right? So if you are to that level of, okay, well, we got money coming into the business now, and we're actually making some money, then I look at it as, well, if I'm better at making a product, selling this product versus marketing this product, then you should be using your money, your capital, to uh, find somebody to take that, kind of help you with that.
Mhm.
It's just like time. Time is, everyone says time is money, money is time. I look at it the same way. I mean, I could go mow my own lawn, but if I could hire somebody to do it for less money than what I would charge theoretically an hour, then I'm going to
Mhm.
go hire somebody.
Mhm.
So I just look at it as, deploying capital. Sorry, didn't mean to like tangent off,
No, no,
but
no, it's good. I mean, it's a good point for every company, right? They have to think about at what point do I outgrow my own skill set? I mean,
sure,
maybe somebody on your team happens to be an expert photographer, but you don't have anybody to write copy or
right,
do advertising or whatever, right? So thinking about what your capacities are in-house,
yeah,
versus when it's time to hire something out. And then, companies get to a certain size and like, hey, we can actually hire a marketing person now. Right. So there's like your needs are going to evolve over time. So, right, some of this is understanding where your proficiencies are and kind of what your needs are at that time. Say, hey, can we do this? Is it going to be more expensive to learn this or pay somebody to learn this? Or do we bring in somebody else who's already up to speed on this? I
yeah,
mean, it's like
Yeah.
he's bringing in, if they have no problem understanding paying for a fractional CFO or bringing
yeah,
in an accountant, for tax purposes at a certain time of year. Hey, we need this.
yeah.
I don't want to have a full-time accountant, so I bring in
No.
somebody else.
I mean, that's the way kind of we approach our business, is like we just kind of look at it as like, all right, we could be doing this, but why, right? If we have the resources, capital, aka capital, to just outsource some things, then why don't we just outsource those things? You know,
Mhm.
or you just don't want to do them, like bookkeeping. I definitely don't want to do bookkeeping, so we hire somebody to do bookkeeping. I mean, taxes. Yeah, I sure. I could probably do our own taxes and all that stuff, but why? Like, let the experts who know what they're doing, who should know that there are things that are changing in the tax code every year, let them do that. Like,
Yeah.
pay them, right? So that frees me up my time to go actually make money for the business. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. Zach, what do you think?
So I would add two things in terms of, when we're talking about sustained success and long-term growth and things like that, aren't capital. The first one is really understanding how to have an emotional connection with your audience. and your target is, we live in a world where there is competition for everything all the time, always, whether it be a beverage space or just a competition for eyes and ears. And having an emotional connection is going to be the single most important thing. I mean, when I worked in the radio industry, the way technology had changed is I'm in competition with every single radio show on earth, because you can listen to any of them anytime you want, or you could just go to Netflix, or you could just go to Spotify, or you could just pick up your phone and play Candy Crush if you wanted to. So what emotional connection was I going to have me stand out above those other things? Because there's always going to be something that's coming up behind you that is going to be in that competition for attention. So it's really understanding, like, how do I, for long-term success, it's how do I have that emotional connection with my client, my customer, my, whatever that is. That's what's going to sustain you. And that's what's going to put you above the noise of somebody else, because there's a feeling there. And, you think about it all the time, just in your own life, is the things that you love, whether it be a show or whatever it is, like, you don't miss an episode of that show, and when it's on. But there are plenty of things in our life. Oh, I like that restaurant. It's pretty good. Well, I haven't been there in 9 months, because I've got all these other things going on. So it's really becoming part of that emotional connection. I think that's vital to hold customers and grow, that kind of thing. And then the other thing is to really is data and collecting data, and you being the person who facilitates and owns that data. It's great to rely on Facebook or TikTok or whatever to try to get followers, but guess who's in charge of those? Them. And they're robots. And you can have 10,000 likes on a page, but Facebook will decide how many of that 10,000 even gets to see your post. And these are people that said they like you. And you're going to get organically about 2% of those people are going to see it, if you're lucky. That's considered good. So that sucks. Like, you worked all this time to get 10,000 followers for them, Facebook, to get all the data out of and make a ton of money off of. And then maybe they'll let you see it if they feel like it. But if you had 10,000 email addresses and you sent out an e-blast, look, 10,000 people aren't going to open it. But I can tell you this much, 10,000 people are going to get it because you control it and you send it out. And I think a lot of times, especially in like this space, we forget how valuable the information it is that we have, like, within our own POS systems and sales and things like that. My God, it's like, that's the data other people kill for. That's the stuff they want to get from you. And you have all of it at your fingertips. And the amount of times we'll talk to people like, oh yeah, I've never sent out an email. I'm like, you have 8,000 people in here. Like, it's free.
It's a great point.
Practically. Yeah.
I think that those different channels that are available to people, right? It can be really alluring to say, hey, there's this massive platform I'm a part of. Right. People have spent money on Google AdWords because you could target and you could do all these different things. But knowing the yield that you get from those, like how many of those convert to actual sales. Like, there are social media brands like where they get paid for impressions, like that is their business. In this space, right? It's in some ways it's like the most old school kind of business. Like, I make a thing and people consume it, and you need people to be able to get that product. So it doesn't matter if somebody in California likes your Instagram post if they don't have a way to get your product, right? In the end, that's what you're trying to get done here. So thinking about the value and the sort of return that you have on these different channels, it might be a little bit more work to put together a newsletter. But if that list is coming from people who have visited your tasting room, like, that person's much further along in their customer journey of like, oh, not just brand awareness, but like they have been a patron. How do you convert them to the next thing? And that comes down to building up marketing assets that are going to appeal to them. They're going to get them to do the thing that you want, whatever that might be. And so I think that it's a great point that, like, you kind of numbers get very big when you're in the online world, but what does it mean for sales? It's not always the easiest thing to track, but some of it is trackable.
I think we get caught up in the shiny new toy of trying to get new. Like, oh, I want more followers, or I want more attention. And so we carpet bomb Google or Facebook or whatever. We spend a ton of money to hopefully get, a handful of new people, when we forget that it's way easier if we said, okay, if I took my entire customer base right now, people who buy things, and I could just get them to buy one more thing. Like, these are people I've already sold the story to. I mean, that was, in the radio industry, it wasn't about getting another person to tune into the show, but if I could get someone who already listened to listen for 6 more minutes and go over a quarter hour, that got me as much of a benefit as I had a new listener. And that's it. I just had to keep someone that was already there, just give them a little bit more and hold them there with way less effort, way less money, way less promotion, and better, really better ROI.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great point. And this getting into a sales discussion, which is a whole nother thing. I have a great webinar if anybody ever wants to check one out with Ben Llewellyn, who I've done. He's comes from the world of sales, but he says the same thing when it comes to sales, right? Selling more, reaching more people, same idea. It's not right, like making more impressions. This is okay, that's the overall goal, but there's lots of ways to get there. And it's saying, well, yeah, I could sell more to each person. I can get each person to come back more often. I can get new customers, right? So thinking, same goes for marketing of, hey, am I trying to build the size of my audience? Am I trying to get more engagement? Am I trying to get more frequency out of this
Yep.
marketing? If I have, you mean this is a great thing if you're in constant contact or whatever, you see how many people opened your newsletter, how many people clicked on different things. That's real data that you can have. And you could say, wow, I'm
Yes.
getting more and more people on my newsletter to actually read through this thing, click on the event link. Maybe they buy then, which means I'm seeing my event attendance go up. That kind of marketing, you get more insight into, and you can see the return on your time versus this sort of,
Yes.
and I'm not trying to say that there's not a value to social media platforms. Of course there are.
It should be a piece.
Yeah.
Social media platform should be a piece. I mean, it can't be the end all be all, but it should be a piece, just like email marketing should be a piece.
Yeah, there's a lot of things here, and we're not gonna, have time to go through every channel here because, right, I mean, some of this is too like what are the building blocks and how you're deploying them, but it's
Right.
all part of the same continuum here, right? Of just thinking about the things that you might do, not realizing that is part of your marketing strategy. And ideally, right, companies should be sitting down every so often to talk about what their marketing strategy is, right? Even if you're doing marketing, doesn't mean that you're being strategic about it, that you don't know who is on your team doing each of these things, like what are the responsibilities. And so, I mean, I know we've touched on this a little bit, but I want to circle back around to just briefly thinking about the sort of marketing competencies that companies need to have, especially as they're getting a little bit older, and how companies can think about what can and should be developed in-house versus outsourcing. There's like, John, you mentioned this sort of uh, kind of, hey, like the replacement value of like, hey, my time, if I am the owner and I could be making sales or I could be editing photos and it would take me twice as long as a professional, that's not a good use of time. But especially as you're kind of building your team, what are some things that you find that some companies can develop in-house, at least for a little bit longer than some of the things that they need a professional straight away?
You could do, you could hire or outsource, not outsource, but keep somebody in-house to do your social media management.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to put that in their job description.
It's a great
I
social
think
media is not an afterthought. Yeah.
and also incentive. So if it's not already in their job description, put it in their job description. And if you add it, then you have to compensate them for it. Because the thing that we always end up seeing is somebody says, oh, hey, we've decided we're gonna do it in-house. And then it's great for like the first month and then it just kind of falls off, right? But you can't, reprimand an employee if it's not in their job description, so if you're gonna do that, something as simple as managing or even just posting to social media,
Yeah.
give them guidelines, put it in their job description, and make sure that they are getting compensated for it.
That's a great point. It is the easiest thing to fall by the wayside if people have other responsibilities. If it's a
Yep.
tasting room
Yep.
manager or if it's somebody who's deputized, and you said, I mean, both this is part of their job description, they're getting compensation, and there are smart goals around it, right? We need to see a newsletter with this frequency. We need to have a post for every outside of our own walls event.
Yep.
Whatever, right? That's metrics, right? That somebody needs to be held to if
Yep.
it's going to be kept in house. And if that's not achievable, that's a good sign that, well, maybe you need help.
Yeah, we were actually talking to somebody yesterday who they're kind of incentivizing their employees um with a performance raise, I guess, if you want to
Mhm.
call it that. If they are hitting certain, tasks of posting to social media, X number of times
Hmm.
a week or a month. I forget what his criterion was, but incentivizing them with that, saying, hey, like if we hit this after a certain, period of time, we're gonna give you a bump in pay. It's like, okay, all right, that
Yeah.
seems fair. But yeah, I think what we end up seeing a lot of times is they're just like, oh, we're just gonna hand it off to the youngest person in the room, and they're just gonna, hey, you go do this thing, and don't really give them guidelines. Don't give them, don't put it in their job description. Don't compensate them for it, and then it just ends up going by the wayside, and you can't do anything about it because it's not. You can't reprimand them for it because it's not in their job description.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. It's it is hard. I feel like that is a joke of in the corporate world is like, oh, I'm head of marketing. I also do all of our ad buys. I also do all of our photography. And it's just
Yep.
right. I mean, some of these are related disciplines, but it's just I'm sure as you know, given that you both kind of have different backgrounds and different areas of expertise, right? You're a standalone firm, and even you have kind of division of labor here. It's hard when you're also
Mhm.
saying you also are going to be front of house. Like that's its own skill.
Mhm.
Um,
Yep.
yeah. Zach, what do you think? Any other thoughts about kind of in-house competencies before we kind of get into outside engagements?
think John did a pretty good, coverage in terms of like what do you outsource versus what do you do in house. I think a lot of times comes down to what are you good at and what do you
Mhm.
enjoy. So it can be different for anybody. I mean, if someone takes really good pictures or they really are good at doing taxes, do it.
Mhm.
That's fine. I think it's, I always pass it through the filter of we all do this where we say to ourselves, man, if only I had the time to do this, we would be really, we could grow. Okay, fine. Then you need to find time to do that. And what is the thing that's getting in the way?
Mhm.
Whether it be payroll or, pick it. I don't care what it is, but
Yep.
obviously that thing is holding you back and that thing needs to be outsourced so you can focus on the thing that you say is so important. Um,
Mhm.
and because I
Rev.
think our brains love to sabotage us and that, well, I'd be more successful if I just had, if I could do this thing. So fine. All right, brain, let's put up or shut up here. Now you have the
Yeah.
time. Let's do this. And
Yep.
and so I
Re-
think it's finding those things.
Yeah. And I think the opportunity cost style works perfectly well, right? In a world of limited resources, right? I'm more valuable over here than there. Makes total
Yeah.
sense. One other point I'll note too is especially for companies that are growing, if you have a team and you're saying, hey, we're building out team, I don't have a full-time role yet. I'm three-quarters of the way towards a full-time role. I could bring somebody on. Well, it's worth going and seeing what your team is good at. So, people
Mhm.
come from all walks of life in this industry in particular. There are very few
Mhm.
people who, from day one of their careers, knew they were going to be in food and beverage and, alcohol production, whatever it is. So people bring different assets, right? Different skill
Mhm.
sets to this field. I worked in beer for a number of years. I had done, budgeting for a federal agency for a number of years, right? And I also like wrote the ad copy, right? And it's just some of this is finding out, hey, somebody has a skill set that you weren't even aware of. Still needs to be formalized. It needs to be put in their job description, but so many people bring so many different backgrounds to breweries, wineries, distilleries, whatever it might be, that it can be really
Yep.
interesting to see, like, okay, if you want to grow the company, you want to get to the next step, because that gets to the question of like, these people want to work in this industry, could probably make more money elsewhere while giving them the growth opportunities, but it needs to be very clear what the expectations are, where the boundaries are, and like, I'm paying you this, which means you're going to do that. So, and then right? There are going to be things until you get to the size where you have entire departments where you're going to need outside help, right? This is
Mhm.
a good sign. This is a good sign for a lot of companies that you've matured to the point where you need things that you're not capable of producing yourself, the same way you would pay for any other kind of professional. So if a producer gets to that point, decides that, hey, I need to engage a marketing firm, this is the time I need to get some more graduated assets. I need to sharpen up a little bit because I have 10 distributors I'm working with now across 5 states and I can't do enough, right? What can they do to make the most of that relationship, to make sure they set themselves up for success, they're getting the most out of their partners and vice versa?
Have good communication.
I put that down. I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
are so many times it's like, we end up working with somebody and they're just non-communicative or don't communicate things to us. And but yeah, having good line of communication and just be willing to tell people that no, we don't want to do that. Some people are just like non-confrontational, and I get it. But for us, we always tell people up front, like, look, if something is not working for you guys, like we do something, just tell us. Like we're adults here. This is not going to hurt our feelings, especially in the beginning. It's when we're trying to figure out how everybody operates. It's like, hey, communicate to us. Like, tell us what we're doing wrong, or tell us this is great, or have good communication. I think that's something that is very important.
Yeah, I've seen it go awry many times about, right, clear about what the project is. We have expectations about what's defined in this engagement, right? I'm going to be getting this. This is what I need from you, the marketing team. If you don't have the language for that stuff, ask the questions up front, because if you assume things, right, this is one of those clear as kind things, like, okay, I know what I'm getting from this company that I'm engaging. Really important. And being specific about what your wants are without being too hands-on. Maybe you've had that too sometimes, where people kind of want to see every step of the process. And it's like, well, you're paying me, as a marketing firm to do this on your behalf. I'm sure you've seen this. This is a social media thing, kind of a meme kind of thing, where it's somebody, a marketing firm lists their pricing, and they say, we do everything, you do nothing, $100. We do everything, you watch, $200. And the most expensive is, you do everything, we do nothing, $10,000. Because, right, there's nothing worse than a marketing firm that's getting kind of every single thing is being micromanaged. Like, if you have a clear sense of what you want from your marketing firm, convey that and let them do the experts, right?
I mean, for us, we kind of like it, somewhere in that middle. We don't want somebody who's literally like, here's the keys to the castle. I'll see y'all later.
Yeah.
That's not great either. So it's just somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. And it evolves. A lot of times it's very, very hands-on for 3 months in the beginning. And then trust has been earned and goals are being met and things are working. Like, okay, great. And then you can back off, or maybe there's a situation where 6 months down the road, something really important is about to happen, and everyone needs to be way more in communication and way more hands-on. That's totally fine too. It really comes down to, again, it's communication, it's setting goals and having reasonable expectations on both sides. And I think it's important to communicate. Like, if you're going to talk to a marketing agency, I'd also encourage, talk to more than one for sure, to make sure that these are people that it's like, at least the way I look at it for us is, you're not outsourcing this stuff. You are bringing us in. We're here now. We on the team. So do we all get along? Do we want to be teammates? Is this working for everybody? You got to make sure that you're in sync with these people. And so I'd try out a handful of people. Just because someone tells you it's really important and you got to work with us, well, maybe, but maybe it's somebody else that kind of understands you more, or speaks to you better, or just like, you like to use the F word and so do they. Like, it's okay. Like, it's
that's a great point. I mean, you mentioned like the importance of building the sort of brand identity. Does the company that you're working with, do they get that? Can they kind of embody your voice, right? This is getting into somewhat of like a nebulous territory. It's not, right, cogs, it's not putting things into a spreadsheet, but like, do they understand who you're trying to appeal to, what your voice is? Because if they can't do that, there'll be a very marked shift of when it's like, oh, this in-house, we did it all this way, and then all of a sudden you started speaking in formal sentences, and like, that's not who we are. Or even just like, all of our product shots used to look like this and now they look like that. Like, if you're doing that on purpose, fine, but a company that gets you, this is still the interpersonal level.
Yeah. I was the most proud of, like, when we were doing stuff when it was COVID time, and especially working in food and beverage. I mean, that was a disaster time. And the fact that our clients trusted us enough to, like, convey the messages that they needed to convey about, their livelihoods and what they were doing. And they were like, I need you to write this for me. And they trusted us like that. We got them, and we had earned that trust, and they knew that we understood them like that. You should be able to, like, trust them to write like the most important message about, the anniversary of your product or whatever it is. Like, if you don't trust that person, then I'd look for a different person that you trusted to do that.
And one other thing I'll say, maybe you're too kind to say it, but I just want to say, please plan ahead with things, right? Marketing in general should not be a fire drill.
Are you kidding me?
Like,
Are you
when your anniversary is? It's getting all these things done. I mean, you're going to be paying a premium if you said, I need full high-res product photo shoot, where I'm getting something that can be blown up to wrap a truck in, and I need it in a week, and I need 20 products shot and edited.
You're talking to people who worked for restaurants.
Yeah.
Restaurants were our clients.
It's always a fire drill, but right,
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to have a much better relationship here, right? If you're methodical and right, and you don't do things piecemeal, right?
Yep.
Something we said from the very beginning of, when you get your very first logo designed, ask the question, get it in the different formats, because somebody's going to say, hey, do you have a vector knockout version? Right? You may not know what that means. Vector means infinitely scalable, right? And knockout means there's not a background, so you can have it over, like, as a transparency over something. It's a simple question. A designer can do that. But if you go back to them 3 months later, well, now it's a new project. So all of which to say, take your time, think about what you need, make that ask, be ready to, invest in this stuff, because it's going to be really beneficial to get it right the first time and have that, like, relationship where you're a good client for your marketing firm, as much as they are, performing for you. So we touched a little bit already on the sort of metrics side of things. Just any other thoughts on how, producers can tell if their marketing efforts are working?
P&L statement.
Yeah.
Money.
In the end, it should be money. Yeah. That's good. I mean, that's what you want to hear, right? Business people don't really care. That at least the people at the top aren't going to say, oh, great, we got more followers. Or right, even like, hey, we have a bill. Like, that's the means to the end of selling more, right?
Yeah. But that's more followers and more likes is like, that's a long game for us. I mean, that's not a instantaneous, right? But I think it's kind of like just looking at the P&L statement, like, if you are dropping X number of dollars into marketing or whatever it may be, and yet your profitability is still the same, then we got a little bit of a problem.
That's it's very helpful, John, that you come from the financial planning background. I mean, I feel like a lot of marketers are, not as focused on that bottom line, but that's what we're here for too, is business.
Yeah, those people don't look at numbers.
Yeah. Yes. It all should redound to the ultimate benefit of profitability.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's tough because some of these things, like social media is a great example. Like, it's very important to have, and it's very important to have it do well. But can I really say, oh, you got, you made $7,247 this month because you had 9,000 followers on Facebook? Like, I can't. There really isn't that same thing. And I'll be perfectly honest with everybody here. Like, when I look at those analytics that, like, Facebook pumps out, whether, engagements or impressions, I don't believe them necessarily. Like, what are they? Like, they just say, oh yeah, give us $100 and you'll reach 1,000 more people. Hey, you reached 1,000 more people. Like, did I don't even know. Like, who are they? Where's this list? It is what it is, and we have to appreciate that data. But it's like, I'm going to assume it's real, but at the same time, like real is the P&L statement. Like that, you can hold on to that yourself.
Yep. So, I spent 2 decades managing people's expectations. Because whether you believe it or not, financial planning is not about investing in the numbers. It's about how do you manage your clients' expectations as to what their money's going to do. And so, part of our meetings when we have prospects is like, and they're wanting to engage us for managing their social media, we kind of tell them like, look, if you think that because you hire us for your social media is going to exponentially increase your bottom line, then you're probably looking at the wrong place. Zack and I always mention that, hey, like this is kind of like having a website, 15 years ago. If you didn't have a website 15 years ago, your business was probably not legitimate. So this is just like another layer of like, most people nowadays are looking for your business on Instagram or on Facebook. So if you don't have a presence there and it's not current, then they're going to say, well, are these people actually open? So we kind of look at it as another thing of, oh, hey, we have a legitimate business. That's how we manage people's expectations.
It's fair. It's just one of the kind of just requirement to be a client facing business these days. And of course there are instances where you can, hey, this event we run every month. We did, some marketing on it. This time around we had double the people. Okay, that's easy to silo. But the sort of broader picture, it's slow and not easily to directly attribute. But certainly, you can't do an A/B test anyway, since you're either marketing or you're not. So
we kind of look at it as drip marketing. It's like you see us on Instagram, you see us on Facebook, you see the company on a billboard, you see it in a piece of, in a magazine. It's like all these little things kind of add up everywhere, right? So you get an email from us, you get a text message from us. It's all of these things that add up to like, oh yeah, hey, let me think about that company again, or you just keep seeing it, right? It's just part of that whole drip marketing thing.
Yeah. Well, ideally, marketing, you're going to get more awareness and ideally more sales in the end. And I'm sure we could go on much longer. Maybe I'll have to have you guys back to dig in a little deeper next time. But we are almost out of time. Before I let you go and we wrap up here, briefly, do you each have one last thing you'd like our audience to know before they leave today? Anything?
Own your audience. Own your audience. That's I preach that more than anything. Is you ultimately you want to control that audience as much as you possibly can, acquire that information, take advantage of it, and don't rely on somebody else or some other website or AI algorithm or whatever robot is out there to do it for you. You can use that to your advantage, absolutely, to then own that information for yourself.
Don't get all crazy on vanity metrics.
I like it. Guys, thank you so much for your time and those insights. And thank you all for joining us for today's discussion on marketing in the craft bev sector.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you, John. Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Chris. And thank you, everyone who attended today. I just want to remind you that you will receive an email with a link to the recording. If you would like to sign up for upcoming webinars or access recorded webinars, please visit virginiasbdc.org/training. These resources are designed to be used in collaboration with your local SBDC advisors. You can sign up for a free and confidential session by emailing help@virginiasbdc.org or via our website. And we do hope to see you all at our next session. Take care, everyone, and happy holidays.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
All right.